미국 브리검영대 마크 피터슨 명예교수. 1965년 19세 나이에 선교사로 한국과 인연을 맺은 뒤 한국을 100번 이상 방문한 세계적 석학이자 한국학의 대가죠. 1973년 미국 하버드대에서 한국학 박사학위를 받은 후 브리검영대 교수로 30년간 한국학을 연구했고 한국에서 두 딸을 입양해 결혼 때까지 뒷바라지를 했다고 하죠. 올해 2월 하버드대 마크 램지어 교수가 일본군 위안부 피해자를 폄하하자 이를 조목조목 반박하기도 한 대표적인 한국문화 전도사입니다. 그의 강연은 유튜버들이 종종 다루는 인기 주제인데요. 오늘 저는 한국사, 세계 최초이자 세계 최고라는 제목의 강연을 공유하고자 합니다. 시간은 좀 지난 영상이지만 우리나라에 대한 색다른 시각으로 지금까지도 많은 울림을 주고 있는데요. 어떤 내용인지 같이 살펴보겠습니다.
So I thought I would look at the world's best things that you find in Korea and the world's first things. The Koreans were the first to do certain things, and they've done certain things best. And I thought I would put them not as separate items. You can sometimes see this. In fact, if you look on the internet, you can find a list of the top 10 things about Korea, and they're just separate lists. But I didn't want to use them as lists per se. I wanted to look at them as clusters of innovative ideas that Koreans did either first or best. The first thing I want to look at is printing culture. And we've heard separate items. You've heard about how Korea has the metal movable type, and you've heard about Hainsaw. They have the 80,000 wood blocks, the largest collection of wood blocks for printing the Buddhist scriptures. But I want to put these all in one category and call it print culture. So I want to put these 4 innovations in printing. You see them often listed as single items, and each one is a single item, is a first, but I want to put them in one category and cluster them and call them print culture. And in the courtyard there are 2 pagodas, and inside of one they found this sutra. This is what I'm talking about. This is the document that was printed around 751. This is the one when the Koreans found this one, they scooped the Japanese by about 10 years. The Japanese had a document that was printed in 760 or so. Now, someone might say this was a Chinese printing and it was only found in Korea. And that's a possibility. It could have been imported from China. But in fact, the scientists have looked at it, and the paper and the ink are indigenous to Korea. So we think it is really a Korean product and not an import from China. The museum does not hold this text. It holds a photocopy of the text. It holds a replica of the text, but it does not hold the text. Where's the text? Well, the book is in France. And it turns out that a French diplomat took the book to France, and it ends up in the Sorbonne in a library there. And on the front cover of the document it says in French, it's just written on the cover, probably the oldest book printed with metal movable type in French, 1377. If you go to Hainsaw, you've got to go to Hainsaw, and you'll see the collection of wooden blocks for printing the Buddhist scripture. And here's one page of the text, and here's what the archive looks like. Give you a perspective of how tall it is. There's a monk in there shelving one of the documents. And this is a marvelous thing. Now, this is later than the metal movable type, and we Westerners tend to have a evolutionary view of science, and as wooden block printing is there, and then later is metal movable type, and metal movable type replaces wooden block printing. It turns out, however, that metal movable type is not necessarily more advantageous than wooden block printing. The reason being, if you print something on a wooden block, you can print off of it forever. If you print something off of metal movable type, it's movable. It's metal movable type. And you set it up once and lock it in place and print off your copies, and then you move it and print the next page, and you move it and print the next page. So once it's printed, it only exists on the paper page. This one, it exists on the wooden block. You can print off a paper page 800 years ago when this was done, and you can come back and do it 500 years ago, and you can come back today, and you can come back 100 years from now, and you can still print off the block. It's like a Xerox machine before Xerox. Well, what about it? So what? Let's ask the so what question. The so what question is, printing leads to books. This whole set of print culture is for the sake of creating text. And text, reading text, leads to education. Education leads to societal progress, and in Korea, eventually to democracy, economic development, innovative products, and a good lifestyle here in Korea. So it's not an irrelevant invention or cluster of inventions. It has relevance for us today. The invention of Hangul is one of the truly unique features of Korean culture. It's a unique alphabet. It's a true alphabet. It's not a syllabary. The Japanese alphabet is not an alphabet. It's a syllabary. It's a syllable set. When you do the Japanese alphabet, you say kaki, kukeko, nani, nu, ne, no, etc. all the way through, and you cannot separate the first letter, kaki, kukeko, ka. You can't separate the K from the A. It's a syllable. Whereas Koreans understood that there were consonants and vowels, and it's a true alphabet. It's a very scientific alphabet to learn. It's a picture of your tongue blocking the air for just that nanosecond to make that K or that G sound. Well, it's a very remarkable alphabet, and it's a pictographic alphabet in a sense. They borrowed the idea of pictographs from the Chinese, and it's the pictures of the sounds that are made. When King Sejong invented this alphabet, he was assisted by a couple of people. One of them was a man by the name of Chung In-ji. And Chung In-ji later wrote down that we've got a great alphabet that we've developed. It's an alphabet that the dullest of people can learn in a day's time. And the brightest of people can learn it in the time it goes to the bathroom. So if you give it a chance to, according to Chung In-ji, if you're smart, you can learn it in very short order. And you can learn it in at least a day. And you know, it's true. At our university, when students come in at first, we teach them the alphabet. And by the end of a couple of sessions, they can sing a song. And they don't know what the words mean, but they can sing. They can copy the words. They can understand what it means in very short order. Well, and not only that, it's the only alphabet that is celebrated in a national holiday. And it's the only alphabet where we know the name of the inventor, and I've got to add the and here because we do know the inventor of another alphabet. The Cyrillic alphabet was invented by St. Cyril, of course, but it's what we can say about the rest of this you cannot say about the Cyrillic alphabet. You don't know what day the Cyrillic alphabet was proclaimed, and you don't celebrate it in a national holiday, and you don't know the principles by which the Cyrillic alphabet was developed. Sejong told us why the sounds make the sounds that they do. And Hangul represents the Korean language. How many people speak the language of Korean compared to other languages of the world, say French? You find that Korean is ranked on this list one step ahead of French. There are more speakers of Korean in the world as first language than there are speakers of French. Now, when I tell this to American audiences, and often when I tell it to Korean audiences, they're quite surprised. More Korean speakers of Korean than of French in the world? No, I thought French was the diplomatic language. I thought there were more speakers of French in the world. And yet, in American schools, we teach French, German, and Spanish. And now we're starting to teach Chinese and some Japanese, and some places some Korean. And yet, Korean should rank as high as French does in our teaching of languages of the world in the United States, in my opinion. Well, add all these things together. The print culture, plus this great alphabet Hangul, and this great language of Korean, and throw in one more factor that I'm not going to talk about in detail. It's Confucian ideology, and you've got the impetus for creating the highest educational standards in the world. Graduation from high school is close to 98%. In the United States, high school graduation rates are 85% in a good state and more like 56% in Washington, D.C., and a very high college graduation rate as well. The educational system in Korea is not without controversy. There are a lot of Koreans that criticize it for this way or that way, but nonetheless, it adds up to one of the highest educational standards in the world. And finally, I would say, what's Korea's secret? I would say it was 3 words. It is education, education, education. And what do I mean by this? The highest literacy rate in the world, the highest high school graduation rate in the world, and the highest college graduation rate in the world. And finally, education in English, economics, and engineering, very applied and practical skills are, I think, the reasons why Korea has been so successful in this modern age. Thank you.
Thank you so very much for this highly informative, insightful, entertaining.
오늘 영상은 여기까지입니다. 끝까지 시청해주셔서 감사합니다.